You know those stories about haunted houses and creepy apartments? They're usually just urban legends, right? Well, I used to think so too, until I lived in one. This is the story of my time in apartment 13, and trust me, by the end, you'll never look at cheap rent the same way again. A few years ago, I was desperate. I needed a place to stay, and my budget was practically non-existent. That's how I ended up in this old, run-down building on the edge of town. It was the kind of place that looked like it had been through better days. Peeling paint on the walls, flickering hallway lights, and this faint, musty smell that seemed to cling to everything. But the rent was dirt cheap, and I figured, hey, I can deal with a little shabbiness. The landlord handed me the keys to apartment 13, and I didn't even blink at the number. 13's just a number, right? Nothing to get superstitious about. The first couple of days were uneventful. I unpacked, got used to the creaky floorboards, and tried to ignore the occasional weird noises. But by the third night, things started to get strange. It was around midnight when I first heard it. A whisper, faint but distinct. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, or maybe the neighbors. I pressed my ear to the wall, but the sound wasn't coming from next door. It was coming from inside my apartment. I laughed it off at first. I'm tired, I told myself. I'm imagining things. But the whispers didn't stop. Every night, around the same time, I'd hear them. And they weren't just whispers anymore. They sounded deliberate, like someone or something was trying to communicate. By the end of the week, I was convinced something was off. One night, as I lay in bed, I heard what sounded like footsteps. Soft, hesitant, but unmistakable. They moved across the living room, paused by the bedroom door. And then, nothing. I turned on the light, my heart pounding. Of course, there was no one there. But the feeling of being watched, that didn't go away. I started recording the noises on my phone. I needed proof, or maybe just validation, that I wasn't losing my mind. When I played the recordings back, my stomach dropped. The whispers were clearer on tape. One word repeated over and over. Get out. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I had to know what was going on. I started asking around about the building, hoping someone could shed some light on what I was experiencing. That's when I heard about Alan, the last tenant of apartment 13. Apparently, Alan had lived there for a few years before he vanished. No one knew where he went. His stuff was left behind, and the police didn't find any signs of foul play. But people in the building whispered about him. They said Alan used to hear voices too. He'd talk about someone or something watching him, lurking in the shadows. Hearing that didn't exactly put my mind at ease. The activity in the apartment escalated. Lights flickered constantly, even during the day. Objects would move. Small things at first, like keys or pens. Then larger things, like my chair. And the whispers, they grew louder, angrier. The worst night was my last. I was lying in bed trying to convince myself it was all in my head when I heard breathing, heavy, labored breathing. And it wasn't coming from the hallway or the living room. It was right next to me. My entire body froze. I wanted to scream, to turn on the light, but I couldn't move. The breathing grew louder, and then I felt it. A pressure on the mattress, like someone sitting down beside me. When I finally managed to move, I shot out of bed and turned on every light in the apartment. But no one was there. The air felt heavy, charged, like the room itself was alive. That was it. I didn't sleep. I didn't even pack properly. I threw what I could into a bag and left before sunrise. I didn't care about the lease, my deposit, or anything else. I just knew I couldn't stay there another second. Later, I found out the building had a dark history. Stories of disappearances, strange accidents, and even a fire decades ago that killed several residents. And apartment 13? It always seemed to be at the center of it all. I don't know what was in that apartment, and honestly, I don't want to know. All I can say is, if you ever see a cheap listing for apartment 13, do yourself a favor. Walk away. Anyway, that's my story. Thanks for listening. And if you ever hear whispers at night, maybe you shouldn't listen too closely.